Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and I am joined, as always, by the lovely Lauren Hersey. How you doing tonight?
It is a fantastic night in the Hersey household. How about on your end, sir?
It's dark here.
Same. It's so dark.
And we're still, 2 weeks out from daylight savings time? Or at least a week out?
Times they are changing. It's getting closer to winter every day, and I am not looking forward to it. With both of us being on the East Coast, it's, it'll be here before you know it. So not wishing away fall.
No. And in fact, I was just, they were talking about the weather patterns for this year, and evidently it's an El Niño, which means more moisture in the Northeast, which means more snowfall, which means the mastodons will be on my front porch really soon. So,
yeah, my daughter actually just told me that today, that we're supposed to get some type of record-breaking snow situation this year. So we'll see. I feel like I've heard it before. I will believe it when I see it. And I welcome it on Christmas Day.
Okay.
Otherwise,
that one day.
One day. Okay. So, Christmas Day is an amazing day, but so was the opening of Magic Kingdom and EPCOT. And that is what we have been talking about, last couple episodes. Last week, we talked about what it was like opening day at the Magic Kingdom, and we're fast forwarding now 11 years, I believe, to the grand opening of EPCOT, which was October 1st, 1982. And that park, if you did not know, is one of my personal favorites. So I'm really excited to dive into see what opening day was like.
Okay, but Lauren, before we discuss opening day at Epcot, we have to acknowledge our sponsor, which of course is Touring Plans. And if you're planning a trip to Disney World or Universal, that can seem overwhelming, given everything there is to see and do. But Touring Plans makes that easy. Their personalized planning tools and real-time crowd insights help you dodge long lines and maximize your time in the parks. So if you're looking to save time and money on your next visit to Central Florida, please check them out at touringplans.com.
And if you don't want to spend the $400 on the new Lightning Lane Premier Pass, then, maybe just spend the $8-10, whatever Touring Plans is, and try it out. Who knows?
Wow. Okay.
Sorry.
No.
Anyway, so excited, like I said, to hear about EPCOT. What can you tell us, sir, about opening day?
Well, okay, forgive me for pulling a James Michener here, but again, you got to kind of back up the truck because remember, Epcot, and a lot of us knew about Epcot before we knew about Disney World, because this was the reason that Walt had supposedly bought all that land down in Central Florida. He was going to build the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. And it was supposed to be this place where it was going to be a living laboratory for breakthrough technologies. And Walt was hoping that American industry, this city would be an actual showcase for American industry.
Yeah, and honestly, it's one of my favorite things to see when I'm on my favorite ride, the People Mover in Magic Kingdom. And, it's if I could pick any of the old Walt videos, that is a favorite of mine. You could just see how excited he was. And it wasn't, it was totally different. It wasn't just about like the fun and the rides and, a fun park. It was really the community of the future. It was, it would have been amazing. I'd still like to see it at some point, but we know that that's not what we actually ended up getting.
No. In fact, to be honest, there's a very famous story about Walt had been gone for about 6 months, and they were having a project meeting at WED, what eventually became Walt Disney Imagineering, and Richard Irvine, who one of Walt's great right-hand men, was walking through the construction milestones to the effect of, well, we're already down there, we're doing site prep, we're putting in the canals to help with drainage, and, we're sussing out where the roads are going. But if we're going to stay on track for construction of EPCOT, and the card Walker, the head of the company after Walt, just sort of interrupted him and said, "You understand Walt's dead, right?"
Mm.
And again, that was the thing. It was Walt's dream, and initially the company just didn't know how to proceed. But eventually, Roy, who went into and Roy, when we speak of Roy, that's Walt's brother, went into deep, deep mourning. But eventually came back. And it's because the other thing that people don't understand is that Roy had told Walt just 3 months before his passing that he wanted to retire, that he was going to step away from the company. And now, during the time when he and his wife Edna should have been traveling the world, enjoying the time that they earned, Roy was back working even harder because he was trying to pull his brother's dream up out of the ground. And so the decision was made at that point that they'd build the Magic Kingdom and they'd build the hotels, and that would effectively be the carrot to lure major corporations to be part of the project. And then eventually, with the money that was raised off of the theme park and the hotels, that they would then go on and fund construction of Epcot. But then, of course, Roy dies just 2 months after Walt Disney World opens, and now
Right.
Card Walker is fully in command of the company, and Card doesn't know what the hell to do.
Right. So it's like, how did we end up with Future World and the World Showcase from the original vision for Epcot?
Well, if we're being completely honest here, Future World is kind of the dumbed down version of Epcot, the city. Whereas World Showcase, in fact, there's some fascinating models and art out there for what was supposed to be Disney World's second gate, the first second gate, and that was the Walt Disney World Showcase. And this was the idea of basically building a second theme park for Walt Disney World on the cheap. They were actually going to build this park, Lauren, in the parking lot of the
What?
in the Magic Kingdom. So you didn't have to do any site prep, which, by the way, had been one of the most expensive parts of building Walt Disney World, taking all of this swampland and turning it into an area where you could build a park. And what's interesting about the design of Walt Disney World Showcase is it's very much a mall of the 1970s. But the notion is, instead of going to the mall and there's the paperback booksmith next to the Sephora store, it's Russia next to Istanbul, next to Portugal. I mean, the conceit of it is that every country that was taking part in this celebration of world cultures would have had the exact same footprint out front. The only key difference is the depth of, for lack of a term, their store at the mall. If you were, say, a Russia and really wanted to showcase, you could have, I mean, your pavilion could go way back, 100 square feet. Whereas if you were Fiji and you just wanted to be there but didn't necessarily have a lot of dough, Disney was perfectly happy to sell you a slot for that would have just 100 or 200 square feet, where you could sell souvenirs and show a movie about but that project stalled out because so few countries wanted to take part, and they really need 30 to pull it off. And at the
Okay.
same time, the Future City thing just stymied Disney. And so Epcot then became the Epcot Theme Center, where it was supposed to be a place where corporations could go and hold symposiums. And it just, over time, it just sort of mutated into, all right, look, we're Disney. We do theme parks. Let's make this a theme park. But, well, you'll love this story, Lauren, that there was a famous day at Imagineering where the company was going to decide, do we go forward with the construction of the Epcot Theme Center, or do we go forward with World Showcase. And so, as the story goes, Marty Sklar is sitting there in the lobby outside of the Disney Board of Directors meeting, and he's got the model for the theme center. He's holding the tiny little model in his lap, and across the way is John Hench, who's got the tiny little model for World Showcase. And both of them know we're going into this meeting, and somebody's project is about to die, and neither of them wants their project to die. And to this day, I once asked Marty who made the first move, and he said, "To be honest, I don't remember. I just remember the two of us standing in the lobby, holding our models and realizing they fit together."
Ah.
And they went into the meeting, literally to the board, and said, "It's one thing. It's not two. It's one. It's peanut butter and chocolate. We're making a Reese's cup." And that's what happened. They figured out, all right, we'll do like half of both, and that's how we wound up with the Epcot Center we got in '82.
Okay, so we're now October 1st, 1982, and
hmm
the doors opened. We got Future World, we got the World Showcase. What was the deal day of? What do you know?
Well, again, they had sort of just thrown open the door. I mean, they'd gotten everything almost finished. I mean, there were a number of rides where it's like, well, this is lovely, but I'd like to hear the soundtrack. And it's like, oh crud, forgot to turn that on. Or there was the matter that Spaceship Earth, the signature attraction of the park, the thesis attraction, if you were. I mean, the idea was you're supposed to ride that attraction. It was supposed to explain what Future World was about, and you get off and immediately go off and explore the other pavilions. But what they found is the ride mechanism wasn't working. Do you remember how when you get to the very top of Spaceship Earth, your ride vehicle turns around and you basically go down to the
Yeah.
unload area backwards? Wasn't working. Okay, so for the so for the first part of the morning, there were people who were going downhill and they would come back into the load station with these bright red faces because they had been leaning forward and all the blood was rushing to their head.
Gosh.
All
Oh my
right, so
gosh.
so what they eventually figured out to do was, all right, the way we're going to temporarily fix this is some poor cast member with really strong legs is going to go up to the, the top of Spaceship Earth. And at the point where your ride vehicle is supposed to turn around, they're going to be sitting there with a folding chair and with their legs
No.
physically turned. So somebody ended. I mean,
Sorry, Billy, you got the short straw.
well, what are the point? I would imagine if it took them a while to fix this. So the Billy probably ended up. I mean, that was the equivalent of a Stairmaster. He probably ended up with these
Oh my
deeply
gosh.
cut thighs. And, but yeah, I mean, that's the sort of stuff that happens when you open a theme park. That things sort of work, and you work toward making them really work.
Right. And I mean, didn't you say there was something going on with the food? Like things weren't all the way ready with that either. So you had some of the key attractions that were not functioning properly, and so you kind of
Oh,
had these bottlenecks.
they did, and same thing. New York World's Fair, and the tradition continues with every single park that Disney's opened since. It's just sort of like, again, you throw it open and you hope for the best.
I mean, that's all you could really do, right?
hmm
I
Yep.
mean, it's not going to be 100% perfection because they set these dates and they tell people it's happening,
hmm
and you can't really go backwards. And you can with an attraction, but not a whole park.
Well, and then you also have to remember you have a relatively new crew that's doing it using new equipment, and by the way, it's not just rides that take a while to get up to speed and operate fully functionally. It's the same thing with restaurants, and Epcot. Epcot had some interesting issues there.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly tough, but
Mhm.
this was a big gamble on their part. They had 25,000 people show up for it. This was not your typical theme park. I think I've heard you say the word infotainment, a handful of times. So it's like people were down to experience like the education and the entertainment wrapped in one, right? I mean, were people excited about it?
They were, and it's interesting you say that because the other thing you do have to remember is Epcot at its heart was a theme park, and a theme park much like Disneyland in Anaheim and Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom. In that, people come to these places, and when they go back home, they kind of want bragging rights. They want to put something on their desk at work or a bumper sticker on their car, so people go, "Oh, hey, you went to Epcot. What was that like?" And so this is why they built the Centaurium, which, by the way, made full use of the Emporium playbook from Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom in Florida. In fact, I think it was on our last show about opening day at the Magic Kingdom. About we talked about how, for example, the Emporium is placed on the right hand of the street because 90% of people who go into the parks are right-handed. And so at the end of the day, and they're looking to buy that souvenir that tells their friends and families that I went to the Magic Kingdom or I went to Epcot because it's on the right and it's the last thing they see before they leave the park. It's like, oh, it's right there. So that's what they did with Epcot. Though what's interesting is that only 30% of the merchandise that was created for Epcot, Lauren, had the logo on it. Uh,
What?
but this is the interesting thing. You have to remember World Showcase, and the gimmick of World Showcase was that you could travel the world. And
Okay.
so 70% of the stores for this theme park were located around World Showcase Lagoon, which is significant because there were 34 stores on opening day. But the gimmick of everything that was stocked in those stores had been was authentic, had been ordered from the host country and shipped over. And so that part of the park really wasn't about rides. It was more about come into our recreation of this country, enjoy some music, eat some food, and by the way, on your way out, buy some butter cookies, which we've imported, and mark the price up just slightly. Uh, but yeah, that I mean, that's
But
the
I feel
thing.
like they missed the mark a little bit, though. I feel like you have this brand new park opening, and like you might not want to go and get your what you call them, lederhosen or
There we
something
go. Well, no,
from
well, no,
Germany.
and it's so interesting you say that because Germany, of all the countries, had the most shops. They had 7 different shops there. They had a confectionery, a toy shop, a porcelain shop, which is not to be confused with the ceramic shop. They had an art and a book shop, and I'm blanking the other one, but 7 stores in that complex.
You're kidding. I mean, I
Yep.
feel like they've really downsized since the opening.
Well, I mean, there has been some simplification. I mean, that's the other thing is that, face it, our tastes as consumers have changed. I mean, for example, when you went into the Centaurium, it was a two-story shop, and again, but it had shelves and shelves of shot glasses and ashtrays and T-shirts and bumper stickers and decals, all of them with the Epcot logo on them. Now, if we jump ahead to March of '99, this store, which has done great business for years, shuts down temporarily, mind you, to be reimagined. They actually set up a different satellite version of the Centaurium across the way in what used to be Innoventions West. And then September of '99, that's when Mouse Gears opens up. And Mouse Gears, in fact, that they retooled the store, Lauren, deliberately because September of '99 was when the company kicked off their what is it, a year and a half long celebration of the millennium, and Epcot
Okay, yeah.
was the park that they were going to do that in. And that version of this park's main retail operation stayed in place again till I want to say March of 2020. So 2 decades. It closed its doors, and that's how we just got the Creation Shop, which I want to say opened in September of 2001. But they're all basically in the same place because Disney leaning into that, yeah, all of their customers are right-handed, and on their way out of the store, it's like the park. They're like, "Hang on, I need a T-shirt." Uh, though one little caveat or tag for the story. This shows you how much Disney leans into its own research. Because face it, there are people who will be in the store and look at something and go, no, I don't want to buy it. And then they walk down the hill and they're about to leave the park and they're like, oh, I changed my mind. I want that. And hey, I want that, like the name of a show. But what's on the right hand under Spaceship Earth just before you leave? And it's Gateway Gifts, which has like the Reader's Digest version of all the merch that you'll find in the Creation Store. So you have one last shot at that T-shirt or the decal before you walk out to the parking lot.
Listen, I wish I had that problem. If I'm in connection, wherever I'm at, I'm like, ooh, I need this.
Yeah.
But I'm sure most people are not like that. All right, so I do have a serious question though, because like I mentioned at the top of the show, EPCOT is really near and dear to my heart.
Okay.
And on some days, I actually think I would pick EPCOT over Magic Kingdom. I mean, I really enjoy it.
Wow.
So growing up, we would go to Daytona Beach and we would go over to Disney for like a day. And EPCOT was my dad's favorite park to go to. So we're talking, mid to late 80s, early 90s. And I do not remember like the World Showcase. I don't really remember any of the educational stuff. All I can remember is getting my picture with the Dreamfinder and having a little plush Figment. Like when they made this park, like was it really for kids?
Well, it is so interesting you bring up Figment because Disney leans so heavily into the Centaurium idea, as in this is the place you come to shop when you're in Future World. There were only a handful of real other stores in Future World, but you just talked about one of the ones that they actually had. That was the Kodak Camera and Film Shop. That was actually just next to the exit for the 3D movie in the Imagination Pavilion, which, by the way, was initially the only place you could go to get that Figment plush. And
Oh.
and those were so ridiculously popular, Lauren. They were selling $500,000 a year in just Figment plush. And in fact,
What?
oh yeah, yeah. In fact, I will tell you because I had a friend who worked on the redo of Journey into Imagination when they changed the ride and took out the Dreamfinder and took out Figment. And that was the head of retail for Epcot literally lifted up his hand and said, whoa, 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 you doing what? Like, do you understand how much Figment plush we sell? Only Mickey sells more in that park, and you're making him go away? What did Figment do to you? And boy, that only lasted like a year and a half, 2 years before they then shut that down and shoehorned Figment back in ASAP.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that you have mentioned before that like Eisner had a different vision for what Epcot was what it should be versus what it kind of was when it opened.
Yep. That's a whole nother story that maybe we should talk about after the coming ad break. What do you think?
That sounds like a plan. And we're back. All right. As promised, Jim is going to tell us about when Michael Eisner entered the picture. And he didn't come in quietly. He had some real bold thoughts and ideas. So what was going on in Michael Eisner's head when he gets to Disney? He gets there in 84, right? So we're 2 years after Epcot opens. What does he
Yeah,
think about
yeah.
Epcot?
Well, to be honest, what's kind of ironic about it was Epcot that actually helped bring Michael Eisner to power as the new head of Disney, because Epcot, when it opened in October of '82, never made its attendance or financial projections. And you have to remember that the cost of this park really kind of got out of hand. It was originally supposed to cost just 400 million. When when they're middle of construction, they're like, okay, it's 800, but that's not too bad. And by the time it opened, it was $1.2 billion, and
Billion?
billion. And this is in 1980s money. And to have this park not delivering, and not only that, to have people, when Disney was surveying them, it's like, well, no, it's nice. I like the countries have lots of detail, and some of the rides are interesting, but it's not as fun as the Magic Kingdom, and that was the thing. So Eisner came through the door, and the Bass brothers, the Texas billionaires, who effectively got behind him and convinced the board, we'll help you fend off the green mailers if you put Eisner in charge. But they were like, okay, here's the deal: you have to fix Epcot, and you also, by the way, have to make Walt Disney World make a lot more money. And so this was, well, for example, Michael was like, how many hotels do we have on property? It's like, well, 3. It's like, okay, we're going to double that at least. And when it came to Epcot, it was about, okay, I have to make this place as fun as the Magic Kingdom. So, for example, Len, Jim Shul, and I are in fact, show should be running in the next a couple of days. Our Equatorial Africa uh, episode for Disney Unpacked about the pavilion for Walt Disney World, that was actually announced on the TV special on CBS about coming soon to this park that got canceled. And one of the reasons that got canceled is Michael looked at it and it's like, that looks very educational. I want something entertaining. And so, and the other thing he had that was all teed up at that point was the Norway Pavilion with its the ride, the flume ride that eventually became Maelstrom. And it's like, World Showcase was desperate for attractions, and so it's like, that goes, let's do that. Also, and remember that the people said they wanted to be more entertaining. So at one point in between the Imagination Pavilion and the Land Pavilion, uh Epcot was actually going to have an entertainment pavilion, and the loose conceit here was it was going to celebrate that most modern of storytelling techniques. It was filmmaking.
Hmm.
So, and what's kind of interesting is it was always part of the entertainment pavilion that there would be a great moments at the movie ride, but the other ride that was going to be in the building was the story of how animation was made. Only this one was going to be animatronic versions of Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy. But they would be working at Disney Studios. I mean, for example, you'd go through the ink and paint department, and there'd be Minnie and Daisy painting the cells, or if you went into where they were supposedly making the movie, and this is one of those movies where it's like, guys, I don't know if that scene's going to do what you think it does, but it was like, The Rescuers had been Disney's most popular animated film uh, up until that time. So, at one point in the ride, you were supposed to enter a scene where Bernard and Bianca were shooting the scene where they climbed into the boat with Ebenru, the dragonfly. And but they instead of it being animated like it's a cell, it's a physical set, and you've got like Goofy as the sound man, and Mickey's in the director's chair, and the Mad Hatter's the guy behind the camera, and it's like, okay, this is interesting.
And they were going to put this in Epcot?
They were going to put this in Epcot. And again, that they had a chunk of backstage that they could drop this thing into. But every time they brought it into Eisner, he'd go, "Oh, this is good, but what if we did this?" And, "Oh, I love that, but what if we did this?" And eventually, they're like, "Michael, there's only so much room backstage at Epcot." And he's like, "Okay, then we'll do this as its own separate thing." And that's where what got announced in 1985, the Disney MGM Studio Tour.
There you go. Now that makes more sense.
Hmm.
So, but what else did he do to make it more fun? Is this around the time that we got actual characters
Yes, in
in
fact,
the
thank
park?
thank you for bringing that up, because again, Eisner comes through the door late September, early October of 1984, and they drop all the research on his desk, and he's looking, and people are like, well, I mean, but here's the thing: Epcot did have characters. They had giant walk around dolls in World Showcase that actually had been repurposed from a parade that Disney did called America on Parade back at the Bicentennial.
I
Only
saw that. It was
there
in
we go.
Liberty Square, right?
There we go. All right,
I know those dolls.
okay, but here's the thing. It's an 8 foot tall, like, American Revolutionary soldier or a
Yes.
cowboy or an
Super
astronaut.
creepy.
All right, so but what they do is they take those things back to the costuming department, and now it's an 8 foot tall guy wearing a serape and a sombrero standing outside of the Mexico Pavilion, and they terrified children. I mean, it was just one of these things where it's like, go up and get your picture taken with the 8 foot tall guy. No, no, I'm
No,
not
no,
doing
no,
it.
no, thank
No,
you. I was good
no, no.
today.
That's right. Why are you making me stand next to the giant Mountie? I don't want to do this. And so, and that was the thing. It's like, look, I get that you think you have characters. You do. They're not successful. They want the characters at the Magic Kingdom. Bring them here. And then it became the game of, all right, well, where does Goofy fit in? It's like, oh, yeah, put him in a kilt. He's in the UK. And what about Chip and Dale? China. They're going to China. Just
Shoehorn them wherever they can fit.
no, that's it exactly. It was just sort of like, go put a beret on Pluto. He's in France. Okay. And that's what happened. I mean, that's how Eisner worked during the first 2 and 3 years. It was a question of, okay, fix that, change that, do that. And the interesting thing is it did begin to turn the park around. That people were like, oh, I can come here and see Mickey. All right, I'm happier here. Plus, I can buy beer. So that's that. It's I don't know that Michael Eisner during those years, during the roughly up until we lose Frank Wells in '94. Those first 10 years, Michael was fun. Michael would try anything. But at the same time, if you got him talking, he's like, oh, if we just known about the Little Mermaid, I wouldn't have built Maelstrom. I would have built a Little Mermaid ride. And that would have worked great in Norway. Hans Christian Andersen, we could have done that. But again, they didn't know.
But I will say, I mean, going back to Walt's original vision for the
Hmm.
parks,
Yep.
I mean, he said that they're never going to be finished, and it was all about progress and forward thinking.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, I feel like he'd be happy with some of the changes that have evolved over time. I mean, like we got Frozen, you know.
We
He
did.
might have not known about the Little Mermaid, but and putting, Ratatouille and Freyons, like I feel like it's best of both worlds at this point, and I think that's why, I mean, my family and I really enjoy it outside of the nostalgia factor.
Well, and I mean this in the kindest possible way because I'm an old fart. I'm 65. So I remember as a kid seeing the company talk up Epcot the city and seeing Walt stand in front of his plans and like, I'm 6 miles tall and this is where the airport's going to go and this is where the suburbs and that's the other thing of this story, Lauren. They got so close. I mean, everybody knows, for example, about the Walt Disney World Shopping Village. But what people don't necessarily remember is one of the reasons that got built where it got built was that Disney came within inches. I mean, they mentioned this in the annual report for 1973. It's there, the shopping village of Lake Buena Vista, because they were about to start building the city of Lake Buena Vista. And well, again, this was going to get them to Epcot, the city, but in kind of on only a Disney would think to do this. You know how when you build a city, the suburbs develop at the outskirts of the city. What Disney had decided to do is like, okay, we don't necessarily have to do it that way. We'll build the shopping village, then build the suburb that uses the shopping village, and then we'll build the city that the people who work in the city live in that suburb. So, but again, this is something that's still a plan in 73, 74. But once the oil embargo happened in 73, any ambition Disney had in regard to Walt Disney World just fell away. They were like, just let's try to make our money back. And then eventually, when that's the other part of the story, is Florida had given them a sweetheart deal in regard to taxes in that sort of thing, but with the understanding that, hey, you were going to build Epcot, the city with all of those great high paying jobs. When's that going to happen? And this is ultimately why, while we got Epcot Center, where, it's the effect of, well, look, it's not a city, but there are lots of jobs, not necessarily high paying jobs.
But there's jobs. But think about all the bits and pieces. So,
Mhm.
I mean, we got Celebration, we got a
Mhm.
people mover, we got the showcase, right? The
Mhm.
World Showcase.
We
Like,
did.
I feel like there's a lot of bits and pieces if you look around, kind of like a sum of all parts
Well,
situation.
actually, I think it was David Brinkley, the famous newsman of the Huntley Brinkley report, who effectively said that, all right, maybe they didn't build Epcot, but when you look at what Disney did, what they built in Florida, and remember, this was a swamp.
Right.
And they built the world's number one tourist destination that it feeds and transports and entertains tens of thousands of people every day. It's sort of like, that's pretty amazing in and of itself, and maybe even more amazing than the city that Walt wanted to build down there. But again, I'm an old fart, and I miss the city. So that's what's interesting is you ride the people mover. It's like, oh, look at the cute city model, and I look at it and it's like, what might have been.
Yeah. Well, listen, I give them I don't know, I give them an A. I think that for with all of the circumstances
Mhm.
that were happening at that time, that they did something that was innovative, that was, fresh and different, and I'm glad that we have it today.
That said, though, I still, if somebody knows the poor teenager who sat there on the folding chair,
Billy, was that
yeah,
you?
there we go, who turned the cars with his legs, I want to talk to that guy.
You come on the show.
Because again, that's the interesting. Just today, I found out that for opening of Epcot, they hired 2,950 people, and that's everybody who worked in operations and food and custodial. And so, just again, I want to talk to Billy, the Billy who thought that, oh, I get to work in the camera shop. Well, it's like, no, take this folding chair and go up to the top of Spaceship Earth. We have a very special job for you because we notice you have very strong legs.
That's great.
So
We appreciate you, Billy.
there we
All
go.
right. On that note, I think it's about time that we close up shop for today. But before we go, I do want to let everybody know what's coming up on our next episode of I Want That Too. We are taking a bit of a detour, but good news is we got a map. Actually, that is the topic for our next show. Disney Park Maps, Disney Fun Maps. And we're going to be joined by none other than our resident Imagineer, or veteran Imagineer, over here on the Jim Hill Media Network, Jim Scholl. And we're going to be talking about the amazing history of the fun maps from Sam McKim's very first Disneyland fun map, and how these paper collectibles have evolved over time. And trust me, trust me, trust me, you are not going to want to miss this epic conversation.
It was a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie. And more to the point, Mr. Schul capped the tail off with some news of an amazing event that's happening out in Southern California, which is why, again, you want to tune in to hear this show. But of course, if you want to stay up to date on everything that's happening on the Gmail Media Podcast Network, please make sure that you're following us on what is it? Facebook, Instagram, and X. We post updates and news for all the shows over there, so you won't miss a thing.
Yes, and if you have questions or ideas for future shows, we'd love to hear from you. And I mean, the map episode was kind of born from a listener reaching out and saying they'd be interested in hearing about that. And so we really do value your suggestions. You can reach out to either of us on social media or drop us an email at jim@jimhillmedia.com or lauren@laurenhersey.com.
And I guess for now, that's going to do it for this week's edition of I Want That Too. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we will see you next time.